This is big. Joining me now, attorney, task force in California, Camila Moore. All right, Camila, you were on this reparations task force. I appreciate you coming on to talk about it. My first question is, which is a lot of people, is how the heck is the state of California proposing to pay to give what could result in $1 billion or more to residents?
Hi, thanks for having me. First, to clarify, in terms of the numbers that's been out in the media, $800 billion, what does that mean? That doesn't mean what the state actually owes African Americans. It represents the amount of monetary loss that African Americans have incurred since statehood due to exclusionary public policy, due to the actions of the state in and of itself. And so
what actions are those specifically?
Sure. So we can talk about the federal, but particularly the California Homestead Act that gave away, for instance, millions of acres of land almost for free, mostly to white families. That was a one example of public policy that African Americans were excluded from. What are the present day implications of that? Well, today, nearly as 46 million white living descendants of that exclusionary land transfer still are living today and still benefit from that land transfer that essentially African Americans were excluded from this. So that's nearly 25% of the U.S. adult population who are white, who are present day beneficiaries of the Homestead Act.
So, ma'am, I'm not familiar with the Homestead Act, I'll admit. However, in this case, it seems like, when you have a crime, you have a plaintiff and a defendant. And it seems now that this entire process is asking people who never harmed anyone to pay a bunch of people that were never harmed that are living today. Do you have a plaintiff that is like, hey, I was wronged personally by this policy, or is this generationally passed?
So the task force has recommended reparations in 5 forms that comports with international human rights standards. So compensation is just one of those elements. And for compensation, we're recommending individual compensation. So if African Americans can actually prove harm in the 5 areas that we mentioned, from housing segregation to houselessness, mass incarceration, over policing, unjust property taking, devaluation of Black-owned businesses, et cetera. But we're also recommending cumulative reparations, so reparations to descendants of slaves on the basis of being a descendant, because the idea is, as a whole, we belong to a class or a group of people who have been discriminated against over time via federal and state exclusionary public policy.
So, Camila, again, though, I get what your intent might be as good as it can be. My issue here is that who's going to pay for this now?
So now that the commission has wrapped up, it is up to the California state legislature to have that conversation around how to pay for our recommendations. 2 elected officials served on our commission, Reggie Jones-Sawyer and Senator Bradford, and they will be most likely the 2 legislators who will be championing this next phase. And they've already come up with some very unique ideas, like reserving, for instance, 0.5% of the state budget annually for these recommendations.
So, ma'am, I got about 30 seconds left, but real quick. So you made this recommendation, and then you're like, hey, we recommend you give all these millions of dollars out that are taxpayer dollars, but we're not going to tell you how to pay for it. Have a nice day. Your election's on the line?
Well, potentially, I guess you could frame it that way, but by statute, AB 3121 required us to study and develop reparation proposals. It did not require us to contemplate how to pay for these proposals, but we did that anyway. We've had conversations about that. We just didn't come up with a final recommendation in terms of how to pay for it.
Okay, well, look, I appreciate you joining us. We take all points of view here, but Camila Moore, I still don't understand how you're going to make a bunch of people that never, enslaved anybody or harmed anybody pay a bunch of people that were never harmed. We appreciate you being here, ma'am.
We can learn from post-Nazi Germany. Thank you.
Okay.